This is the Dzogchen Semde Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. It is Ray Skywalker early Sunday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi after reviewing the Four Noble Truths. Let us begin with a tale of two archetypes. The Buddha Gautama, also known as Shakyamuni, and his foolish cousin Devadatta. Where the Buddha demonstrated flexibility, Devadatta demonstrated rigidity. Where the Buddha demonstrated love, Devadatta demonstrated fear. Where the Buddha demonstrated being rational, Devadatta demonstrated being superstitious. Where the Buddha demonstrated being laid back, Devadatta demonstrated being controlling. Where the Buddha demonstrated being egalitarian, Devadatta demonstrated being elitist. Where the Buddha demonstrated being lucid, Devadatta demonstrated being cryptic. Where the Buddha demonstrated being cooperative, Devadatta demonstrated being competitive. Where the Buddha demonstrated being kind, Devadatta demonstrated cruelty. Real or imagined, actual or typical, these two archetypes have huge sway over humanity, whether we refer to them as matriarchy or patriarchy, proto-Buddhism or institutional Buddhism. Perhaps that is why Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, that the majority of humans are more like cranky Mace Windu, grumpy Mace Windu than they are like groovy Qui-Gon Jinn. They're more like the Big Lebowski than they are like the dude. I'm going to demonstrate the Four Noble Truths through both perspectives of institutional Buddhism and proto-Buddhism, and you get to choose for yourself which you find more empowering. That's a tough word, empowering. Sounds like a tongue twister, doesn't it? So, institutional Buddhism will say that life is suffering, and that suffering is due to, well, listen, that everything sucks all the time. Proto-Buddhism says, no, it doesn't. Proto-Buddhism would first say that is not a literal statement, that's a figurative statement, that's a hyperbolic statement. Let's take a closer look at that rationally. Let's translate the ancient Pali word dukkha not as suffering, but as stress. And then let's speak to any person who has their PhD in biology, and they will agree with Neil deGrasse Tyson that yes, it can feel like the universe is trying to kill us, that we have evolved to perceive stressors not as some great cosmic punishment, but because, like most things in evolution, we evolve the capacity to perceive stressors to keep us and our descendants alive. It's just that simple. Ask a biologist and they will tell you that yes, there are circumstantial stressors and there are physical stressors and there are interpersonal stressors and there are mental stressors. Let us not make the mistake of poo-pooing mental stressors. They evolved to keep us alive, though inconvenient they could feel. Let's look at the second noble truth, cause or exacerbation. If you ask a member of the Theravadan sect who was practicing institutional Buddhism, they'd say the cause of our stressors is desire. Therefore, we deserve our stressors because we're just debaucherous little bastards. If you were to ask a member of Mahayana institutional Buddhism, they would say, yes, the causes is our karma, and therefore we've earned all our sufferings. Oh, what sinners we are. However, if you were to speak to a member of Proto-Buddhism, they'd say, okay, yes, there are stressors. That is an inevitability, given the complexity of life, the universe, and everything. But due to a quirk in our evolution, we tend to exacerbate it. How do we do that? A tool that has been useful in the evolution game is our dopamine-oriented reward system. It is as if it induces us to subconsciously ask 6 questions that I like to call the 6 F's when viewed with any new thing, being, or phenomena. Deep, deep, down, down, whether we notice it or not, it feels as if we're asking, hey, that new thing over there, should I fuck it? Should I feed on it? Should I fight it? Should I flee from it? Should I faint before it? Should I fawn over it? Now, yes, on one hand, these survival instincts keep us alive long enough to reproduce. But when they become our North Star, metaphorically speaking, when they become that which defines us, something very bad happens. It's not remotely sustainable in the long term. Consider, if you will, a flat tire on the side of the freeway. I was born in 1965 when the crust of the earth was still cooling. I was a little boy. You could rummage around in the trunk of the car and see an extra tire that is identical to the other 3 tires on the car, assuming one was flat. You could replace it, and then you could replace the flat tire with the spare tire, and then have the spare tire, the now flat tire, repaired at your leisure. Imagine my shock a couple of decades ago when I was helping my former wife with a flat tire on the side of the road. I went to the trunk to discover what they now call a donut tire, which is considerably smaller than the remaining 3 tires. You cannot travel 3,000 miles on it. It's basically designed to get you off the freeway, down the off-ramp, and to the very first tire shop you find. Getting stuck in our dopamine reward system 24/7 is like driving around on a donut tire. It's better than nothing, but not much. We now come to the third noble truth: liberation. But liberation from what? If you do ask a member of institutional Buddhism who favored the Theravada sect, he would say liberation from desire. If you were to ask a member of the Mahayana faction of institutional Buddhism, they would say, oh, no, it's liberation from the three mental poisons, dread, desire, and delusion. But on the offhand chance that you ask someone who practices proto-Buddhism, they would say it's liberation from the tyranny of dopamine, liberation from the tyranny of our survival instincts. You see, we have more than just one reward system. In addition to the dopamine reward system, we have an oxytocin reward system. And it very much looks that they occupy the same regions of the brain. However, the former drives competition, the other cooperation. The former drives cruelty, the other compassion. The other will always leave us wanting more, and that is an evolutionary feature. Consider this. When we are hot, when we've exercised or exerted ourselves, we have our dopamine reward system drives us to seek a tall glass of water. What happens if in childhood you had one tall glass of water and you found it so satisfying and so fulfilling you never craved hydration ever again? You'd be dead in a week. What happens if after the first time you suckled a meal as an infant, you were so satisfied you never craved another meal, liquid or solid? You'd be dead. So the dissatisfaction inherent in our dopamine-oriented reward system is useful. It keeps us alive, but it is not remotely fulfilling. It was never it was never meant to be. It does not function to satisfy us. Our oxytocin reward system that drives us to cooperate, that drives us to experience compassion, is fulfilling. So the Buddha is all about, if you want fulfillment, traverse the path of empathy and cooperation. That will grant you liberation from the tyranny of living in survival mode. If you've had the misfortune to speak with a ridiculously wealthy stockbroker, you will see that these are people who have been conditioned to just live in their dopamine reward cycle, and they are just devoid of empathy and cooperation. They're competitive and they're cruel and they're mean and they're superior. They think they're superior, and they're really quite unpleasant, though society lauds them as winning the capitalism game, or at least coming close to it. I remember not too long ago, I think it was less than 12 months ago, a billionaire, very politically influential billionaire, was asked, do humans deserve to live? And he couldn't answer that. He looked like a deer in the headlights, and he stuttered and stammered. Those who were rewarded with billionaire status are those who are completely defined and ruled by their dopamine reward system. But they've paid a terrible price. They have sacrificed cooperation and compassion and contentment upon the altar of wealth and power and fame. The third noble truth is that there is liberation from this trap. When I was a little kid, when the crust of the earth was still cooling, I used to watch reruns of the Jetsons. And in the title sequence, George Jetson winds up on their dog Astro's treadmill. And his last words of the cartoon are, Jane, get me off this crazy thing. That's exactly how each of us feel about the tyranny of our dopamine reward system. If not immediately, then eventually. If not overtly, then subtly. If not directly, then indirectly. If not actually, then potentially. This is what drives midlife crises. Consider, if you will, the plot of an incel who, for a myriad of reasons, can't seem to find romantic fulfillment, no less sexual. The ones who are stuck in their dopamine reward system are driven mad by this perpetual sexual frustration. Those who have been liberated from the tyranny of their dopamine reward system can find fulfillment regardless of their sex lives, regardless of their income level, regardless of the 6 F's. In an ideal world, we would effortlessly meet the needs of both systems. The liberation the Buddha offers us is not liberation from merely possessing a dopamine-oriented system, but it is liberation from its tyranny, so it no longer defines us and controls us. Too many of us have fallen prey to the propaganda used by Madison Avenue to control us. Drink this soft drink and you'll be a chick magnet. No. Switch from glasses to contacts and girls, and the football quarterback will give you his heart. No. Intellectually, we can see that's malarkey. But we're conditioned to be controlled by our dopamine reward system until it's our tyrant. And the Buddha offers us liberation from that dilemma. That's great that that possibility exists. What is the path towards that? Well, if you ask a card-carrying member of institutional Buddhism, the Theravadins would say, well, it's about doing everything right. It's right view and right intention and right communication and right conduct and right commerce and right effort and right mindfulness and right meditation, and you better do it right or you're gonna burn in hell. Seriously, you can go to some Theravadan countries where they have entire parks filled with hell-oriented statuary of people enduring one form of suffering or another. But if you are talking to a card-carrying member of Mahayana institutional Buddhism, they'll say, oh, yes, this is a good starting place, but it's going to take you much more than this to become a Buddha. And it's going to take you, a length of time equal to the lifespan of 3 universes. So buckle up. If you speak to a tantric member of institutional Buddhism, they say, well, through great austerity, you may be able to do it in 7 lifetimes. But what about Proto-Buddhism? Proto-Buddhism says, hey man, this is the path of enlightenment. Enlightenment is nothing more than mastery of the Eightfold Path. And mastery sounds like a great big scary word. Mastery just means that we have mastered a skill, we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. As children, we mastered using the commode instead of our diapers. We mastered brushing our teeth. We mastered tying our shoes. We mastered riding a bike. We even mastered reading, writing, and arithmetic, enough to allow us to eventually graduate high school. Now, the Buddha made a really radical promise in the second to the final passage of his discourse on the four bases of mindfulness. He explained that one could master this path in as little as 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or 7 days. That's a tall order. How does that work? Simple. The seventh fold of the Eightfold Path is mindfulness. The eighth fold of the Eightfold Path is meditation. These two are the dynamo that drives the path. Simply by watching and resting in harmony with our breathing about once every 12 hours or so, we cannot help but notice change. And the more we do this, that which we notice during our previous inhalation, let me rephrase this, as we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and less graspable, viscerally, effortlessly, automatically. At least for a little bit, at least for a minute, or at least for a moment, until our next inhalation when the cycle begins afresh. The more we sit and breathe and watch and rest, the more we cannot help but practice kind intention, kind communication, kind conduct, and kind commerce. The more we sit and breathe and watch and rest, the more our choices and utterance and deeds flow, not from contrived calculations, not from wild scatterness, but instead from love's deeply centered spontaneity, which is known by many names, including right effort, or effortless effort, or doing without doing, or wu wei, or going with the flow, or being in the zone, or expedient means. So the delicious irony is that simply by cooperating with our autonomic nervous system and harmony with our breathing, we can master the Buddha's path in as little as a week. Considering the power and the benefit of watching and resting in harmony with our breathing. Oops, one moment here. Let's switch gears and actually practice Anti-Yoga's union of awareness and letting go. As a preliminary practice, I invite you, let us together as a team gently invite our real or imagined subtle energy to coalesce at the crown of our head. Doing so is as easy as using the tip of our left index finger to support the lower knuckle of our right index finger, palms up in our lap. Excuse me. Let us not make the mistake of actively focusing on our nostrils or our breath, for active focusing so overworks our medial prefrontal cortex right behind our forehead that it triggers our amygdala at the bottom of our brain, which functions as the seat of anxiety and aggression. We don't want more of that. We want less of that. And that's why we're meditating. So instead, let us treat our nostrils and our breathing the way a piano student treats the sound of the metronome. They're too busy focusing on their sheet music and keyboard to actively focus on the sound of the metronome. Instead, they hold that sound in passive peripheral awareness. Likewise, as we passively notice air enter our nostrils, let us silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb, watch. And as we passively notice air exit our nostrils, let us silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb, rest. We do not play with these two verbs in an effort to coerce our autonomic nervous system to watch and rest. That would be superfluous. Why? Because it is already wired to do that. Then why do we play with these verbs? To remind our will, to remind our intention, to take a relaxing break from the exhausting habit of actively competing against our own autonomic nervous system, and instead cooperate with it, vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly. The moment you have a specific question about the philosophies or techniques that support meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions about once every 13 minutes or so. So let us begin by counting our first 12 inhalations. Even though I instructed you to keep your hands in your lap, I'm lifting my hands up so that I might demonstrate. Every time we silently and mentally recite the verb watch during our inhalation, let's advance our right thumb across the sets of creases found upon the underside of our fingers. Let us do this together right now. Counting 12 inhalations takes approximately 1 minute. If you would like to sit for an additional 12 minutes, then I recommend using your left thumb to count not inhalations, but sets of 12 inhalations each. So let's touch the tip of our left thumb, the lower set of creases on our left little finger, and then return to our right hand and count another 12 inhalations. Having completed another 12 inhalations, we can now advance our left thumb to the next set of creases. And now you get the basic idea. Allow me to remind you that the enlightenment the Buddha offers us is not a lobotomy wherein we stop feeling certain emotions. It is simply mastery of the set of tools he has given us to cope with whatever perceptions, emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, or imaginings that seem to pop up in our life like a game of whack-a-mole at Chuck E. Cheese. Meditation is not the absence of stimuli, Meditation is the process wherewith we dance with whatever comes up, be it external or internal, physical or mental, pleasurable or painful, interesting or boring, convenient or arduous, glorious or grotesque. So we do not repress experience. We watch it and relax into it. Checking for questions. Having completed our first collection of 13 sets of 12 inhalations each, how will we keep track of our second collection? Simple. Let us return to the tip of our left index finger, dutifully supporting the lower knuckle of our right index finger. We can now drag the tip of this left index finger up the bottom of our right index finger until it comes to the second knuckle or the middle knuckle. And then again, we could collect 13 sets of 12 inhalations each. Having sat for the better part of an hour, we might find it refreshing to knock out a few Buddhist burpees. So I'm going to take a moment, swing the camera around. Oof. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. For Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible thanks to the generosity of viewers just like you. In approximately 9 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's dusk practice of Meditate Like a Jedi. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.